Hi, my name's Bethany. I work in the Physics Outreach Department here at the University of York. Today we're going to go through the Hot CNO Cycle. It is a game and it can be played on one of two scales. The smaller scale, I have here, all of the isotopes on one A3 sheet. This can then be played in a board game style between 4 to 5 people. Alternatively, if you do have the space, you can do a 4x4 metre large scale version with each isotope its own A3 sheet. I've laminated them here to help them last longer. In order to play the game, you need a coin, and you also need a timer for each student. Also, if you're playing on the small scale, you'll need some sort of marker for whilst you're going around the board. Just to say, it doesn't have to be an iPad, it can be anything in form of timing device. On the floor, you might notice that there are black squares with white text. These indicate stable isotopes, and there's also white squares with black text. This indicates unstable isotopes. The aim of the game is to emit an alpha particle. Students can start on any squares that begin with carbon or nitrogen, so any of those isotopes. I'm going to start on nitrogen 14. There are many different cycles in the Hot CNO cycle. The one I'm going to run through today starts at nitrogen 14. The fact that it's a black square with white text indicates for us that it's a stable isotope, therefore I cannot beta decay. Instead, what I'm going to have to do is absorb a proton, so I need proton absorption. This is indicated by me flipping a coin until I get a heads. When I get a heads, I'm allowed to absorb a proton and move on to oxygen 15. Oxygen 15 has a half-life of 122 seconds. This means I now have to start my trusty stopwatch and wait 122 seconds before I'm allowed to flip the coin. If after this time has lapsed I get a heads, I'm allowed to beta decay. However, if I get a tails, I have to wait yet another 122 seconds before I can flip the coin again. Let's assume that I eventually do manage to decay down to nitrogen 15. At this point, I have two options. If I get a heads, I absorb a proton and become oxygen 16. But if I get a tails, I absorb a proton and immediately decay via alpha emission down to carbon 12. Let's assume that I do the latter and decay to carbon 12. I'm now on carbon 12, which is a stable isotope. This means that I need to keep flipping the coin until I get a heads. When I eventually do get a heads, I'm allowed to move on to nitrogen 13. Nitrogen 13 has a really long half-life of 10 minutes. I'm not going to stand here and wait for 10 minutes to lapse on the clock, because during that time I'll almost certainly have absorbed a proton. Therefore, what I'll do instead is keep flipping the coin until I get a heads, at which point I'm allowed to absorb a proton and move to oxygen 14. So let's just assume I've done that. I'm now oxygen 14. The half-life of oxygen 14 is 71 seconds. Therefore, this time I can wait the full 71 seconds to see if I beta decay or not. I start my timer and wait 71 seconds before I can flip my coin. After that time, if I get a heads, I'm allowed to beta decay down to nitrogen 14. However, if I get a tails, I have to wait yet another 71 seconds before I can flip the coin again. Let's assume that I got it first time and I'm allowed to beta decay to nitrogen 14. I'm now back at nitrogen 14, so I've completed one full Hot CNO cycle. There are many different paths around the Hot CNO cycle, and students might not end up back where they started. However, they will always eventually end up emitting an alpha particle. You'll notice with 10 to 15 students playing the game that there are certain sticking points on the board. And that's because certain isotopes have very long half-lives, so students have to wait quite a long time to flip the coin, and therefore if they get tails, they've got to wait another period of time before they can flip the coin again. This is all part of the game and helps us to understand how the Hot CNO cycle works at such high temperatures.
Hi, I'm Jenn, and I'm a PhD student in nuclear physics at the University of York. Up to now, we understand the basic process of the cycle. The half-life of the unstable isotopes tell us how long this process can take. Also, flipping the coin allows us to understand that these decays are random. After running this cycle for some minutes, we can stop and ask ourselves, which of us has created an alpha particle and who got stuck in the oxygens? Basically, we are creating helium using protons during a cycle. But why do some of us get stuck in the waiting points? First of all, their half-life is very long, so we have to wait a long time until we can flip the coin. And secondly, these isotopes cannot capture a proton and escape, so they have to wait for the decay. However, when we are at a very high temperature, we can break out of the cycle capturing an alpha particle. This breakout is exactly what I am trying to determine in my research. In my case, I will calculate how important is that oxygen 15 captures an alpha particle, helping the elements to escape the cycle and create heavier elements. So now we are going to add the alpha capture into the activity by introducing these breakout points. One is the oxygen 15, so we locate this here, and the other one is in the neon 18. So when we reach these breakout points, we follow the instructions. Keep flipping the coin until we get tails or a half-life expires. If we get tails, we will capture an alpha particle and escape the cycle until eventually everyone is out. This activity is a demonstration of the Hot CNO cycle. This cycle can only happen in a very hot place. When we have a neutron star taking material from a partner, there are huge explosions and we reach these extreme temperatures. This explosion is known as an X-ray burst, and they are very fast and violent. With this breakout, we end the game, but in reality, when we leave the cycle, many other processes take place to produce heavier elements.